Andrew Roberts, Napoleon the Great. Embark on a thrilling journey through the life of Napoleon Bonaparte, an iconic figure who rose to power from humble beginnings. In this summary of Napoleon the Great, by Andrew Roberts, you'll unearth Napoleon's Italian roots, his meteoric rise in the French military, and his unwavering dedication to the ideals of the Enlightenment. Witness his military campaigns across Europe and the Middle East, his tumultuous relationships, and the political reforms he enacted as France's first consul. Gain a deeper understanding of the man behind the legend, and the many factors that contributed to his eventual downfall.
The Italian roots of Napoleon. Napoleon Bonaparte, known as a French conqueror, was actually born in Corsica, an island with Italian roots. His family, despite their respectable status in Corsican society, applied for nobility to ensure his prosperity and success. Napoleon attended the Royal Military School of Brienne-le-Château, where he learned and excelled in various subjects. Despite being teased by classmates for his Corsican accent, Napoleon's hard work paid off, and he became one of the youngest French army officers at the age of 16, and the only Corsican to hold a prestigious artillery commission. Napoleon's rise to power. After returning from Middle East campaigns, Napoleon joined a group of conspirators in a daring mission to topple France's government on November 10, 1799. France was in turmoil with a corrupt government and economic inflation, and the military was suffering defeats. Napoleon convinced the council guards to forcibly remove council members, paving the way for the new constitution, which replaced the directorate with a consulate, and gave Napoleon the most powerful position as first consul. Napoleon's rise to legendary status. In 1795, Napoleon successfully suppressed a violent uprising, which led to his promotion as second-in-command of the Army of the Interior. His new role gave him command over the Army of Italy, where he executed a daring campaign against the Austrians and Piedmontese while outnumbered. Napoleon won decisive battles, including the siege of Mantua and crossing the Alps, making him a French hero. He became legendary for his strategic planning, boldness, and military prowess. Napoleon's botched campaign in Egypt. Napoleon's Egyptian campaign, aimed at disrupting British power, quickly turned into a disaster plagued by disease, violence, and defeat. Despite capturing Alexandria, Napoleon's soldiers suffered from harsh desert conditions, contracting malaria, and being attacked by Egyptian soldiers on horseback. In Jaffa, Napoleon's overconfidence and violent behavior led to the brutal pillaging of the city and the deaths of many soldiers from the plague. The campaign ended in defeat after months of battles with the Turks, Mamluks, Afghans, and British. Napoleon returned to France without accomplishing his mission in Egypt. Napoleon's romantic woes. Explore Napoleon's relationship with his wife, Josephine, and the revelation of her affair which happened while he was in the middle of a military campaign. Napoleon Bonaparte, apart from his military success, was also a prolific letter writer, and some of his correspondences were with his wife, Josephine. However, their union was not as it seemed from the outside, especially in its early stages. Josephine, a widow, did not love Napoleon as deeply as he did her, but she saw their marriage as a smart move. Conversely, Napoleon was infatuated with her from the start and loved her son from her previous relationship. The rocky start to their marriage was further compounded by Josephine's long-standing affair with Lieutenant Hippolyte Charles. Napoleon only found out about it in 1798 while on his Egyptian campaign, which was also dedicated to proliferating Enlightenment thought. He aimed to combine his military campaign with intellectual pursuits, as he was accompanied by scientists, artists, botanists, zoologists, and geographers. In Cairo, he founded the Institut d'Égypte, focused on scientific research and art, with a goal to promulgate scientific advancements worldwide. The institution discovered the Rosetta Stone that further propelled it into the limelight. In conclusion, this summary highlights the life and times of Napoleon's marriage, Josephine's infidelity, and his military and intellectual pursuits, bringing forth the complexity of his character. Napoleon's rise to power. After returning from Middle East campaigns, Napoleon joined a group of conspirators in a daring mission to topple France's government on November 10, 1799. France was in turmoil with a corrupt government and economic inflation, and the military was suffering defeats. Napoleon convinced the council guards to forcibly remove council members, paving the way for the new constitution, which replaced the directorate with a consulate, and gave Napoleon the most powerful position as first consul. Napoleon's triumph in Marengo. Napoleon, after introducing popular reforms and reinvigorating French business while cutting taxes, set out to battle against the Austrians on Italian soil. The French forces had been under siege and suffering badly, but Napoleon managed to draw the Austrians to the west, dividing his army to prevent the enemy's retreat. The Battle of Marengo began, the French troops being outnumbered, and Napoleon retreated until fresh troops arrived in the late afternoon. With their reinforcements, the French forces pushed the Austrian army out of Marengo and reached an armistice that gave France control of the northern Italian territories for 14 years. Napoleon's political triumph. In 1801, France and Austria signed the Treaty of Lunéville, ending a decade-long war. The treaty granted France additional territories in Italy, Belgium, and the Rhineland, but Britain became France's last remaining enemy. In 1802, the Treaty of Amiens was signed, bringing temporary peace to all of Europe and making Napoleon wildly popular. However, the treaty did not address key issues surrounding commerce and strategic territories, leading to Britain declaring war just a year later. Nevertheless, the Treaty of Amiens established Napoleon as France's first consul for life and eventually led to his anointment as emperor. Napoleon's triumphant battles. This summary recounts Napoleon's strategy to defeat Austria and secure his dominance over Europe in the early 1800s. After shifting his army's front 90 degrees south, Napoleon surrounded and secured Ulm, forcing another Austrian surrender. Later, he defeated the Russian army in Austerlitz by exploiting a mistake made by the Tsar and then defeated King Frederick of Prussia's army in Jena. However, Napoleon's ultimate goal was to force a British surrender, as Britain was financing his enemies. By isolating Britain from the rest of Europe, Napoleon aimed to cripple their economy. These battles exemplified his tactical genius and marked significant moments in the history of Europe. The Bloody Battle of Eylau. In 1807, Napoleon led a gruesome battle against the Prussians and Russians at Eylau as part of his efforts to create the continental system. Despite impressive tactics and a cavalry charge, it took another battle at Friedland to end the war and result in the Tilsit Peace Treaty. Napoleon's fatal mistakes. Napoleon's misguided focus on the continental system led to disastrous consequences, including the Peninsular War and the violent Russian campaign that saw the deaths of over 140,000 French soldiers. Despite capturing Moscow, Napoleon was forced to retreat, with his armies decimated by disease and Russian ambushes. Napoleon Bonaparte had bigger plans than just conquering Europe. He wanted to exert further pressure on the British by capturing Portugal and extending his reach across the globe. However, his ambitions were disrupted when the fighting erupted in Spain and quickly spiraled into a devastating conflict known as the Peninsular War. The war could have ended differently if Napoleon had focused his efforts on Spain, but instead, he split his attention, attempting to make the continental system work. The continental system required countries like Russia and Austria to avoid all trade with Britain, even if it meant incurring major economic losses. Unfortunately, these countries were not willing to sacrifice profit for the sake of politics. Napoleon's divorce from Josephine and marriage to Marie-Louise, the daughter of Austria's emperor, did little to help France's relations with Austria. Russia, in particular, resented the continental system, leading to Alexander siding with Britain against France in 1810, which culminated in the violent Russian campaign. Napoleon's army of 600,000 men marched into Russia in June 1812, while Alexander's army fell back deep into Russian territory. Over the months that followed, disease decimated French ranks, and they eventually arrived at the Battle of Borodino without their full strength, leaving them vulnerable to defeat. Napoleon was eventually forced to retreat from Moscow, facing the brutal Russian winter and ambushes from Russian soldiers that resulted in the deaths of thousands of his convoy members. The French retreat out of Russia was a living hell, with the soldiers reduced to eating dead horses, and some even resorting to cannibalism. By the end of it, Napoleon had lost more than half of his forces, except for those who had been held captive, tortured or skinned alive by the Russians. It was a disastrous campaign that sealed Napoleon's downfall and changed the course of European history forever. Napoleon's fatal Russian campaign. Napoleon's disastrous campaign in Russia resulted in the loss of over 500,000 men, mostly due to disease and starvation. His subsequent efforts to rally new troops, including young boys, were unsuccessful, leading to his defeat in the Battle of Leipzig. Despite winning several battles, he was ultimately forced into exile on the island of Elba, leaving his wife and child behind. Napoleon's return. After being kept in confinement on Elba, Napoleon seized the opportunity to reclaim his throne when he learned of the return of monarchy in France and the failure of the Allied forces to fulfill their agreements. He landed on the southern coast of France on March 1, 1815, and marched through villages and over mountains covering 190 miles in 6 days. Napoleon encountered pro-Bonapartist soldiers who joined his advance and reached Paris on March 20, met with zero resistance from the monarchy. Louis XVIII fled to Ghent, and the next day, Napoleon drafted a new constitution, abolished all forms of slavery, ended censorship, divided power between the emperor and legislature, and renounced all ambitions of empire. The rise and fall of Napoleon. Napoleon's swift return to power was followed by a quick and decisive defeat at the Battle of Waterloo, due to a departure from his successful strategies. His troops were divided, attacks were poorly organized, and miscommunication caused him to lose the battle. The British Navy blocked his escape, and he died in custody on a remote island. Despite years of pain, the heroic leader was celebrated by 1 million people at his proper funeral.
The life of Napoleon Bonaparte was full of victories and losses, as we have seen in this summary of A Napoleon the Great, by Andrew Roberts. His humble beginnings on the island of Corsica and subsequent rise through the ranks of the French military demonstrate his determination and prowess as a leader. Though some of his decisions led to devastating consequences, Napoleon's achievements, such as his enactment of political reforms and his dedication to the Enlightenment ideals, will forever be etched in history. Despite his ultimate exile and demise, the legacy of Napoleon Bonaparte as a great conqueror and strategist lives on for us to study and admire.